Imagine waking up in Rome sometime in the late 5th century, perhaps around 476 AD, a city that once stood as the center of the known world, the jewel of a sprawling empire. As your eyes adjust to the morning light, you are struck first by the sheer scale of the city. The streets are wide, paved with worn stones that have seen centuries of emperors, soldiers, merchants, and citizens tread upon them. In the distance, towering marble columns rise toward the sky, remnants of temples dedicated to gods who were once worshipped with devotion, though their voices now echo more faintly in the hearts of the people. The sun glints off mosaics embedded in the walls of villas and public baths, sparkling like fragments of a forgotten glory. Yet even as they shine, the cracks in those very buildings hint at decay. You may see statues of emperors, gods, or forgotten generals standing proudly in the squares, but many are chipped, weathered, or partially destroyed, victims of both time and human neglect. The city appears magnificent at first glance, breathtaking, almost eternal, and yet this grandeur masks a reality far less forgiving. The streets hum with life. Merchants set up stalls, offering their goods to a crowd of citizens who pass hurriedly, their faces etched with worry. Soldiers march through the squares, some in shining armor, others ragged, their discipline uneven, their loyalty uncertain. Senators, or those who still hold the title, walk with an air of authority, but their influence has waned. The political center of the empire has fractured, and their decrees carry little weight outside the walls of the Senate. There is noise, commotion, the cries of street vendors, the chatter of townsfolk, and the clatter of carts rolling over uneven stones. Seems lively, even vibrant, yet underneath this ordinary urban chaos lurks a deeper, more dangerous turbulence. The city is no longer as safe as it once was. The echoes of empire are fading, and in the shadows of Rome's magnificent architecture, peril waits. As you walk further into the city, the smells hit you next. It is a pungent, almost suffocating mix. Smoke from countless fires mingles with the stench of rotting refuse. The aqueducts that once delivered fresh, clear water to every corner of the city are crumbling. Water stagnates in the channels, carrying disease and creating breeding grounds for insects. You notice pools of stagnant water in low areas, where children play despite the risks, and rats scurry along the edges, thriving in the decay. The smell of human waste is everywhere, seeping from overflowing sewers and poorly maintained latrines. Disease is a constant companion in Rome's final century. Malaria spreads through the marshy outskirts of the city, dysentery follows the contamination of water, and smallpox strikes without warning. Life expectancy has dropped dramatically compared to the glory days of the empire. People live with the constant awareness that illness could claim them at any moment, that even a minor cut or infection might be fatal without proper care, which is rare and expensive. The people themselves reflect the harshness of the era. You pass citizens who wear clothing patched countless times, their tunics faded from years of use. You see children whose faces are gaunt, whose laughter is fleeting, overshadowed by hunger. Mothers carry bundles, balancing infants on their hips, while keeping an anxious eye on the bustling streets. Old men sit on benches watching, remembering days when Rome's roads stretched unchallenged across continents, when the city was vibrant and secure, and when order reigned. Now they speak quietly among themselves, wary of who might be listening. The city is a mix of desperation, cunning, and survival instinct. People are polite when it serves their interest, cruel when it benefits them, and indifferent when it costs nothing to ignore suffering. Trust is fragile, often a currency too expensive to spend. As you continue your walk, the disparity between the rich and the poor is unmistakable. Lavish villas, still magnificent despite the wear of time, line certain streets, their owners insulated from much of the city's hardship. Within their walls they enjoy comforts that most Romans can only dream of: heated baths, abundant food, fine wine, and entertainment. But for the majority of Rome's citizens, survival is a daily struggle. Bread, porridge, or whatever scraps can be scavenged form the main diet. Hunger is constant. Markets overflow with goods in theory, but prices are inflated, and scarcity is common. Harvests from the surrounding countryside have grown unpredictable due to invasions, poor weather, or overtaxation. Famine, once rare, is now a periodic terror that could strike without warning, reducing entire neighborhoods to despair. Even the city's infrastructure, which once symbolized Roman ingenuity and control, is faltering. Roads, aqueducts, bridges, and public buildings show signs of decay. Stone crumbles where mortar has given way. The Colosseum, once a centerpiece of public life and spectacle, is partially abandoned, stones stripped away for reuse elsewhere. Public baths, which once fostered social life and hygiene, now function sporadically. Fires, a frequent threat in densely packed urban areas, sweep through streets with alarming speed, leaving destruction in their wake. You notice the remnants of recent damage, a collapsed wall here, a smoldering building there, and signs of hurried repairs that could barely restore function, let alone beauty. Rome in its final century is also a city under siege, not only by decay and disease, but by fear of violence. Street gangs and thieves are a constant threat. Soldiers, meant to enforce law and protect citizens, are inconsistent in their duty. Some are loyal, others corrupt, and many are mercenaries who fight for coin rather than justice. A quarrel in the street could escalate into a deadly fight. Citizens walk carefully, eyes darting for danger, always assessing threats. Even in the marketplace, where life should be ordinary and trade peaceful, tensions simmer. Arguments over prices, insulted merchants, or accusations of theft can escalate into chaos. The city is alive, but alive with a tension that is always ready to snap into violence. The political scene mirrors this chaos. Emperors, once viewed as divine or untouchable, rise and fall with astonishing speed. One day an emperor may hold power and issue decrees that shake the empire. The next, he might be assassinated in the Senate, or betrayed by those closest to him. Rome itself, the symbolic heart of the empire, has lost its invincibility. The empire's borders are under constant threat from invading tribes, the Visigoths, Vandals, Huns, and others. Soldiers that once marched confidently along the frontier now retreat, defect, or fight for their own gain. The empire that once projected order across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East is shrinking, fragmenting, and bleeding resources. Within the city, this uncertainty filters down into every interaction. A casual conversation might carry political consequences. Loyalty is a dangerous gamble. Power is fleeting, and ambition can be deadly. And yet, amidst all this decay, life persists. Street performers, vendors, craftsmen, and families continue their routines, determined to survive in a city that tests them at every turn. Children play in alleys, ignoring the risks. Merchants haggle passionately, trying to eke out a living from the chaotic market. Priests and religious figures still perform rituals in temples, attempting to provide spiritual guidance to a population increasingly desperate for hope. The city is a paradox, a place of beauty, history, and resilience, yet one where danger, disease, and despair are constant companions. The mental toll of life in Rome's final century is immense. Citizens live with uncertainty and fear in ways that are almost unimaginable. The streets are unsafe, disease is rampant, food is scarce, and political intrigue surrounds every decision. People are forced to adapt, to become cunning, suspicious, and resilient. Friendships are tested by circumstance. Loyalty is often transactional, and survival demands more than bravery. It demands intelligence, adaptability, and sometimes sheer luck. Families are torn apart by misfortune, wars, or epidemics. Communities that once provided safety and comfort now struggle to maintain order and cohesion. The sense of security that had once defined Roman life is gone, replaced by constant alertness and cautious observation. As you stand in the Forum, surrounded by the ruins of temples, public buildings, and arches, the realization hits: Rome is no longer the unstoppable eternal city of legend. It is a city in decline, beautiful yet fragile, majestic yet mortal. Its citizens, like you, are caught between the memory of glory and the harshness of reality. The eternal city is not eternal anymore. Even as you marvel at the artistry, the scale, and the history etched into every stone, the danger of disease, starvation, and violence looms large. Rome in its final century is not just a place to live, it is a place to endure, a city that demands cunning, resilience, and constant vigilance from all who call it home. To survive even a single day here, one must navigate a labyrinth of dangers, physical, social, and psychological. The streets are alive with motion, yet beneath the movement is a rhythm of instability, a pulse of decay, a constant reminder that life in Rome's final century is as precarious as it is extraordinary. And as you walk past another crumbling building, another exhausted soldier, another weary merchant, you understand that history has become reality, the empire is falling, and survival is no longer guaranteed, even for those who are strong, clever, or resourceful. Rome's final century is a city of contradictions, powerful yet vulnerable, magnificent yet decayed, alive yet suffocating under its own weight. To live here, even for a single day, is to confront the stark reality of a world in collapse, a civilization at the edge of history, and the fragility of human life itself. As you step further into the streets of Rome, the initial awe at the city's size and splendor begins to fade, replaced by a keen awareness of the harsh reality that surrounds you. The grandeur you saw from a distance, marble columns, mosaics, statues, is interrupted by cracks, dirt, and decay. The streets are no longer merely pathways to markets, temples, or baths. They are arenas of survival, unpredictable and dangerous. You hear the chatter of citizens, but it is laced with tension. People talk quickly, voices tight with urgency, always glancing over shoulders. The streets are crowded, yet you feel an unsettling sense of isolation. In Rome's final century, being surrounded by thousands of people does not guarantee safety. It only heightens exposure to the threats that lurk in every corner. The air is heavy with odors that make each breath a reminder of the city's decline. The fragrance of bread baking in the market mixes with the stench of refuse piling in the streets. Water stagnates in ditches and pools, creating breeding grounds for insects and disease. Flies buzz incessantly, landing on discarded scraps of food and on the worn sandals of passers-by. Every step you take could bring you closer to contamination. The aqueducts, once marvels of Roman engineering, now carry less water, and much of it is tainted. Many districts rely on communal fountains that are frequently dry or filled with brackish water. Illness is omnipresent. Children cough as they play near the filth. Mothers wipe dirt and grime from their babies' faces, and the elderly shuffle along slowly, their bodies weakened by years of struggle, malnutrition, and exposure. Disease is as constant as the sun in this city. Malaria creeps silently through the neighborhoods, spread by mosquitoes in marshy areas. Dysentery strikes suddenly, often killing the weak and young before anyone can help. Smallpox erupts unpredictably, leaving survivors scarred and communities devastated. A simple cut from a stone or a minor scrape from a fall can become fatal if infection sets in. Sin is rudimentary. Knowledge of hygiene is limited, and access to competent healers is rare. The city itself, once designed to facilitate order and cleanliness, has become a breeding ground for sickness. Those who can afford care may survive a bout of disease, but the majority face each day with a lingering threat, never truly certain if they will see another sunrise. Navigating the streets themselves is an exercise in vigilance. The cobblestones are uneven, worn smooth in places by centuries of foot traffic, and treacherous when wet. Horses, carts, and wagons clatter over the stones, sometimes carelessly, and the risk of injury is constant. Alongside you, merchants call out their wares: fruit, vegetables, fish, grains, and scraps of cloth. Yet the vendors' cries mask the tension of a city on edge. Arguments erupt spontaneously. A disagreement over a price can escalate quickly. Thieves, skilled and audacious, watch every transaction, ready to strike when attention wavers. A momentary distraction could cost you more than your coin, it could cost your life. Even casual encounters with strangers carry a risk. Trust is not freely given in these streets. It is earned with caution, maintained with vigilance, and easily broken with a wrong glance or misstep. The people you pass reflect the precariousness of life in Rome. Children run through the streets with playful disregard for danger, yet many are gaunt from hunger. Mothers balance infants on their hips while carrying bundles of belongings, moving with practiced efficiency through the crowd. Old men and women sit on the edges of public squares, their eyes weary, hands twisted from years of labor, watching life move around them. Laborers, blacksmiths, carpenters, and artisans carry heavy loads, shouting to one another across narrow alleys. Street performers attempt to earn a coin with acrobatics or music. Their shows brief respites from the harsh realities of hunger, disease, and social tension. Everywhere you look, life continues, but it is life tempered by fear, caution, and the relentless awareness of mortality. Violence is never far away. Soldiers patrol certain areas, but their presence is inconsistent. Some maintain order while others exploit it, demanding bribes or extorting those who cannot pay. Gangs roam freely, taking advantage of any lapse in vigilance. A fight in the marketplace can erupt without warning. Weapons are common, and their use is swift. A pickpocket might be armed, a dispute over a cart of grain can turn deadly, and even a casual insult might provoke a lethal response. The city itself seems to vibrate with tension, a collective anxiety that hangs in the air as heavily as the smoke and smells. For anyone unfamiliar with this environment, navigating even a short journey could prove fatal. The architecture of the city, while grand, adds another layer of danger. Many buildings are dilapidated, abandoned in part, or structurally unsound. Balconies crumble without warning. Roof tiles loosen and fall into the streets below. Narrow alleyways twist unpredictably between buildings, providing hiding places for criminals and places for ambush. Crowded market areas amplify the chaos. You must constantly adjust your path, never walking with complete confidence, always calculating risks, scanning for threats both visible and unseen. Economic hardship deepens these dangers. Food scarcity is common, and prices fluctuate unpredictably. Markets overflow in theory, yet the average citizen struggles to purchase enough to survive. Farmers from the surrounding countryside are often reluctant to bring goods into the city, fearing bandits along the roads. Supply lines are fragile, and any disruption can lead to famine or severe shortages. Hunger is not only a matter of discomfort, it heightens desperation, making citizens more likely to steal, fight, or betray one another. The streets become arenas where survival instinct often outweighs morality or social custom. The psychological burden of life in these streets is profound. Every interaction carries risk. Every decision, even the smallest, might have consequences far beyond your immediate understanding. Citizens live in a state of constant alertness. Children learn early to observe adults' faces, to sense moods, and to detect danger. Adults continually assess the trustworthiness of strangers, the loyalty of neighbors, the stability of soldiers, and the reliability of merchants. Social bonds, while present, are fragile and transactional. Alliances form and dissolve quickly, based on immediate necessity rather than long-term trust. In a city where the empire itself seems to teeter, uncertainty pervades every relationship. The physical dangers are matched by social instability. Political factions and ambitions are present even at street level. soldiers, guards, and even ordinary citizens align themselves with factions, sometimes declaring loyalty openly, sometimes covertly. The city is not merely a collection of people and buildings, it is a living organism with its own currents of influence, allegiances, and rivalries. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time or speaking to the wrong person could result in harm. Many Romans move cautiously, speaking softly, walking quickly, avoiding large gatherings, and choosing routes that minimize exposure to potential conflict. Even mundane errands require thought and strategy. The streets are also a stage for the desperate, the cunning, and the opportunistic. Beggars sit at the edges of the marketplace, hands outstretched, faces etched with hunger and despair. Some beg for survival, others for personal gain. Criminals exploit every opening. Pickpockets, highwaymen, and thieves find their prey among the distracted or unlucky. Scams, frauds, and deceptions are common. Merchants might shortchange buyers, guards might extort travelers, and neighbors might betray one another for coin or favor. Survival requires constant awareness, quick thinking, and sometimes ruthless action. A single lapse in judgment could lead to theft, injury, or death. Despite these dangers, there are moments of resilience and community. Street vendors offer simple sustenance to those who can pay. Neighbors share small amounts of food or water when they can, forming fragile networks of mutual aid. Festivals, religious rituals, and public performances provide brief relief from the ever-present tension. Music, dancing, and storytelling allow Romans to connect with one another, to find joy amidst suffering, and to maintain a sense of identity and culture even as the empire falters. These moments, however fleeting, remind citizens of the world that once was, and the world they struggle to preserve. The final century of Rome is, above all, a lesson in the fragility of civilization. The streets themselves reflect the breakdown of order. Public infrastructure is failing, law enforcement is inconsistent, and social cohesion is weakened. People navigate the city with a combination of learned skill, instinct, and luck. Those who succeed are those who can read the streets, anticipate danger, and move decisively when needed. The unprepared, the complacent, or the overly trusting do not last long. Every day is a test of endurance, strategy, and resilience, with mortality as a constant companion. As you continue to traverse the streets, you notice that the environment itself seems to be conspiring against you. Narrow passages funnel crowds, creating bottlenecks where theft or assault is more likely. Stairways leading to upper levels are worn and unstable, threatening collapse underfoot. Bridges spanning canals or rivers show signs of neglect, with loose stones and eroded supports. Public squares, which once hosted grand assemblies or ceremonies, now serve as marketplaces where disputes frequently turn violent. Even the familiar, the paths you thought you knew, the corners you believed safe, can become treacherous without warning. In Rome's final century, the environment is not merely a backdrop, it is an active participant in the struggle for survival. The social landscape mirrors the physical hazards. Citizens are constantly aware of rank, faction, and allegiance. A poorly timed remark could anger a soldier, a merchant, or even a passerby with political affiliations. Alliances and friendships are often strategic, formed out of necessity rather than genuine trust. Children are taught early to observe and understand social cues, to sense tension in the crowd, and to recognize the dangers in seemingly innocuous interactions. Adults operate with a similar awareness, negotiating the delicate balance between cooperation and self-preservation. Life on the streets requires intelligence, observation, and the ability to react quickly to threats both immediate and subtle. In this environment, the concept of safety is almost meaningless. Even familiar routes carry risk. Familiar faces cannot be entirely trusted. Diseases, starvation, criminality, and political intrigue combine to create a city where every step must be measured, every encounter evaluated, and every day survived. The ordinary routines of life, buying food, delivering goods, visiting friends, become exercises in strategy and caution. Survival is not merely about physical strength or courage, it is about perception, timing, and the ability to navigate the invisible currents of danger that flow through the city. If you had hoped for a simple meal in Rome's final century, you would quickly discover that such hope was fragile. The city, once the heart of a vast empire, now struggles to feed its citizens. Markets bustle, but not with abundance. Stalls overflow with vegetables, grains, fish, and bread in theory, yet the prices are high and the supply is uncertain. A loaf of bread, once cheap and plentiful, can now cost a significant portion of a laborer's daily wage. Wheat, which the empire once imported in vast quantities from North Africa, is now scarce, disrupted by raids, poor harvests, or the crumbling supply chains that once brought life to the city. Hunger is not an occasional inconvenience. It is a constant companion, shaping decisions, interactions, and even morality. Walking through the marketplace, you would see the tension that hunger creates. Citizens scan the stalls carefully, counting their coins again and again, calculating whether the small purchase they hope to make is feasible. Merchants, aware of scarcity, raise their prices with little compunction. Arguments break out frequently. A mother negotiating for a handful of vegetables might be confronted by a soldier seeking a bribe, or a boy stealing an apple from a stall. Hunger sharpens minds and claws alike, transforming ordinary disputes into life or death struggles. Theft is rampant because the line between survival and crime is thin. A starving man might pick a loaf of bread to feed his family, knowing the consequences if he is caught, yet unable to resist the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. The consequences of hunger extend far beyond the marketplace. Malnutrition is widespread. Children grow up weak, small for their age, their immune systems compromised, making them more vulnerable to disease. Adults labor with reduced strength, their bodies deteriorating under the strain of physical work without proper nourishment. Even soldiers, who are expected to march and fight for the empire, struggle to maintain their strength. The decline of food security directly undermines the very fabric of Roman society, weakening labor, defense, and morale. In every alley and courtyard, the shadow of hunger looms, shaping every decision, every interaction, every day. Famine strikes more than just the poor. Periodic crop failures, invasions, or political instability disrupt the flow of grain and other essentials. Rome, a city that once relied on sophisticated logistics and supply networks, now suffers when any part of that system falters. Ships carrying wheat from North Africa may be lost to storms or raiders. Caravans from the countryside may fail to arrive because roads have become unsafe. The rich, insulated in their villas, still feast, but the common citizens face scarcity that can last weeks or months. Hunger becomes a shared, citywide reality, linking the fates of all those struggling to survive, yet creating an even sharper divide between the wealthy and the impoverished. The physical manifestations of hunger are clear. The skin becomes pallid, eyes sunken, muscles weakened, and energy depleted. Children are particularly vulnerable, their growth stunted and their vitality compromised. Families ration whatever they can find. Meals that once included multiple ingredients now shrink to small bowls of porridge, perhaps flavored with herbs or whatever vegetables are available. Bread is precious, broken into tiny pieces, stretched across meals that barely sustain life. Hunger affects both body and mind. Decisions are made with the urgency of need, morality is compromised by necessity, and relationships can fracture under the stress of scarcity. Hunger also shapes behavior in subtle ways. The desperate will sometimes abandon social norms to survive. A neighbor may steal from a friend, a servant may take from a master, a merchant may adulterate grain to stretch his supply. Famine and scarcity transform ordinary citizens into opportunists. Trust erodes, communities become fragmented, and survival often depends on cunning and ruthlessness as much as physical strength. Observing the streets, you would notice how people negotiate every exchange, how families guard their meager stores, and how children learn early to understand scarcity, rationing, and the unspoken rules of survival. The urban poor, crowded into cramped neighborhoods, face additional challenges. Housing is insufficient, ventilation poor, and sanitation minimal. Hunger amplifies vulnerability. Malnutrition leaves people more susceptible to disease. Simple fever can become deadly, and epidemics sweep rapidly through the dense population. Starvation weakens the body, and in crowded areas, survival is a daily negotiation with both the environment and the people around you. Families compete for space, for food, and for opportunity. Alliances form and dissolve based on the ability to provide sustenance, creating a complex web of social dependence driven entirely by survival. Even those who work hard cannot guarantee food. Farmers in the countryside struggle against poor weather, pests, and raids. Caravans transporting grain into Rome face bandits, logistical failures, and the unpredictable whims of local officials. A citizen may labor in the market from dawn to dusk, only to return home with nothing but a few stale scraps to feed their family. Hunger in this era is indiscriminate in its cruelty. It does not spare the diligent or punish the lazy according to any fairness. It is an ever-present impartial force that tests endurance and ingenuity at every level of society. The emotional toll of hunger is profound. Families live with constant anxiety over the next meal. Children cry from starvation or fatigue. Parents suffer guilt for their inability to provide. Social tensions rise as scarcity exacerbates envy, frustration, and resentment. A small act of generosity, a loaf shared, a vegetable given, can mean life or death, yet the same scarcity breeds suspicion. In such an environment, communal bonds are strained. Trust is a scarce resource. Survival becomes not only a matter of nourishment, but of social navigation, understanding who might help and who might harm in the pursuit of sustenance. Hunger also has political implications. Public unrest is common when scarcity strikes. Riots in the streets over bread have historical precedent, and in the 5th century, Rome is no exception. Soldiers and guards often intervene, sometimes brutally, sometimes ineffectively. Popular discontent grows, fueled by desperation. Leaders who cannot guarantee food for the populace quickly lose legitimacy. Even a powerful general or senator can be undermined by the simple reality of famine. Food is power in Rome's final century. Control it, and you wield influence. Fail to provide it, and you invite chaos. Yet amid scarcity and suffering, Romans exhibit remarkable resilience. Markets continue to function even under extreme stress. Citizens improvise with whatever food is available, creating meals from combinations that might seem unpalatable or insufficient. Families share resources cautiously, rationing with ingenuity. Street vendors sell small portions to feed as many customers as possible. Communities form informal networks to aid those most in need, even when resources are minimal. Survival requires creativity, adaptability, and determination. Hunger shapes a society not only through deprivation, but through the ingenuity it demands. Food itself becomes a social and cultural marker. Those with wealth can access delicacies once common to the empire, imported spices, preserved meats, fine wine, and elaborate breads. For the poor, sustenance is simpler, functional, and repetitive. Meals are calculated to maximize energy and longevity rather than pleasure. Ingredients are limited, often to grains, legumes, vegetables, and the occasional fish. Meat is rare, reserved for feasts or the very wealthy. Even water, which once flowed abundantly through aqueducts, is now carefully conserved and rationed. Access to nourishment is uneven, reinforcing social hierarchy while demonstrating the fragility of the urban environment. Hunger also dictates movement and choice within the city. Citizens may travel long distances in search of cheaper food, risking danger along the way. Crowded streets, unsafe neighborhoods, and bandits complicate the simple act of acquiring a meal. Some choose to forage in abandoned areas or along the city's outskirts, scavenging what others have discarded. Risk is constant. A journey for food is never safe, and the stakes are life itself. The struggle for sustenance dominates everyday life, leaving little room for leisure or contemplation. Every action, every choice, revolves around the possibility of starvation or the acquisition of food. The impact of hunger reaches deep into the cultural psyche. Romans are acutely aware of scarcity. Stories and lessons emphasize prudence, thrift, and foresight. Rituals around food and feasts carry symbolic weight, highlighting the fragility of abundance. Festivals that once celebrated plenty are shadowed by awareness of hunger. Even in religious practice, prayers for sustenance, protection from famine, and survival of the community reflect the centrality of food insecurity. Hunger shapes thought, belief, and action, reinforcing its role as a constant and shaping force in daily life. Families are forced to make difficult choices. Parents might skip meals so children can eat. Older children might take on laborious work to contribute, and siblings negotiate over limited resources. In some cases, children are sent to distant relatives or households in hopes of better sustenance. Hunger fractures households as well as communities, creating emotional and physical stress that resonates across generations. Survival in Rome's final century is therefore not merely an individual struggle. It is a shared, familial, and communal challenge that tests endurance, compassion, and resourcefulness. In the final century, Rome's citizens live in a delicate balance between survival and collapse. Hunger is never far away. Markets, streets, and homes are permeated with the anxiety of scarcity. Life is fragile, and each day brings a new negotiation with the harsh realities of the environment. Food is more than nourishment. It is power, survival, and social currency. Those who can navigate scarcity gain an advantage. Those who cannot suffer its consequences, often in silence. The struggle for sustenance defines the experience of every citizen, coloring interactions, decisions, and the very rhythm of life. Even as you witness these hardships, you notice resilience and adaptation. Citizens develop networks of barter, relying on exchange of goods and services when currency is insufficient. Neighborhoods organize collective support systems, sharing bread or vegetables when possible. Improvisation is constant. Meals are stretched, portions divided, and leftovers repurposed creatively. These strategies demonstrate the ingenuity required to survive in a city where hunger is omnipresent and resources are scarce. Rome's final century tests not only strength and courage, but also resourcefulness, intelligence, and adaptability. As you wander the streets of Rome in its final century, you cannot escape the sense that the city itself is alive with tension, as if it senses the instability of the empire that once ruled the known world. The political landscape has changed so dramatically that ordinary citizens cannot simply live their lives without constantly accounting for the dangers posed by the ambitions of those who claim authority. Emperors rise and fall in rapid succession, often meeting violent ends at the hands of rivals, conspirators, or even their own guards. A ruler who seemed secure yesterday may be dead today, leaving a vacuum of power that sparks intrigue, violence, and fear. In this fractured environment, loyalty is fragile, alliances are temporary, and trust is a rare commodity. Walking past the Senate, you might hear whispers of betrayal. Senators convene in dimly lit halls, discussing plots and counterplots, their faces lined with worry. The political system that once governed the empire with precision has become a theater of survival for those with ambition. Laws are often ignored, decrees unenforced, and the influence of any official is limited to the strength of the troops who enforce it. Citizens cannot rely on the state to protect them, because the very people charged with governance are often preoccupied with their own survival or power struggles. The institutions that once projected order and stability are crumbling. leaving Rome exposed to the chaos that reigns beyond its walls. Emperors themselves are often nothing more than figureheads, their power contingent on the loyalty of generals, mercenaries, or political allies. Some rise to power with widespread support, only to be betrayed by those closest to them. Others seize control through force or deception, ruling through intimidation and fear rather than law and governance. Assassination is a constant threat. One day, an emperor might address the Senate with confidence. The next, he might be strangled or stabbed in a secluded corridor. These violent transitions of power are not isolated events, but part of a recurring cycle, a symptom of the disintegration of the structures that once made Rome invincible. The streets reflect this instability. Soldiers, once symbols of protection and discipline, are now unpredictable. Some pledge loyalty to an emperor, others to a general, and still others to their own survival or gain. Military units can rebel, change sides, or engage in looting when resources are scarce. The presence of armed men is both a reassurance and a threat. They are meant to enforce order, yet their actions are guided by self-interest rather than law or morality. As a citizen, navigating the city means being acutely aware of who controls the streets at any given moment, which factions are clashing, and how your behavior may be interpreted. Even an innocent comment can be seen as an insult or a political statement putting you in danger. Rome's vulnerability is magnified by external threats. Tribes that the empire once held at bay, Visigoths, Vandals, Huns, and others, press relentlessly at the borders. These invasions are not distant stories. They affect daily life in the city. Supplies from the provinces are disrupted, caravans are ambushed, and news of cities falling spreads fear. Citizens hear rumors of sacked towns, massacres, and the displacement of families. The fear of invasion seeps into every interaction, creating a city-wide anxiety that pervades homes, marketplaces, and streets. Even if one is not personally threatened by foreign forces, the economic and psychological impact of these invasions shapes every day, adding another layer to the constant struggle for survival. Political chaos also creates opportunities for corruption and exploitation. Officials who once enforced law now exploit their position. Bribes, extortion, and favoritism are commonplace. Merchants must navigate a web of officials who may demand additional payment for permission to sell goods or safe passage through the city. Soldiers may side with whichever faction offers the most immediate benefit. Citizens must constantly assess the intentions of those in authority, making careful calculations to avoid being targeted, exploited, or harmed. Political survival requires more than loyalty or courage. It requires strategy, observation, and sometimes deception. Even ordinary citizens are drawn into the web of political instability. A laborer delivering goods might be coerced into supporting a faction. A merchant may be forced to sell supplies at discounted prices to curry favor, and families might be pressured to provide assistance to soldiers or officials in exchange for protection. Participation in political affairs, whether voluntary or coerced, carries real risk. Mistakes can be fatal, and neutrality is often impossible. The entire city is entangled in a network of obligations, alliances, and threats that make even mundane actions fraught with danger. Rumors, propaganda, and misinformation are weapons as potent as swords. Citizens hear conflicting stories about leaders, military campaigns, and conspiracies. One source claims an emperor is beloved, while another insists he has lost the support of his generals. Allegiances shift quickly, and acting on incorrect information can have deadly consequences. Trust is fragmented. Family, neighbors, and even longtime friends may have hidden agendas. Life becomes a constant exercise in discernment. Navigating a city where appearances are deceptive, words carry weight beyond understanding, and alliances can change overnight. The decay of traditional authority also leads to the rise of new powers. Local strongmen, wealthy merchants, or influential generals can assert control over neighborhoods or districts. These figures wield influence through a combination of resources, military strength, and political connections. They may provide protection, but their motives are rarely altruistic. Aligning with such powers is a calculated risk. Safety may be gained, but loyalty can be tested, and betrayal is always a possibility. The balance between self-preservation and opportunism dominates decision-making for anyone seeking to survive. In the city's public spaces, political chaos manifests in tension, unrest, and occasional violence. Crowds gather in forums discussing news and rumors, their words sharp with suspicion or anger. Demonstrations, protests, or riots may erupt when dissatisfaction reaches a tipping point, especially when food scarcity intersects with political unrest. Soldiers intervene, sometimes brutally, sometimes ineffectively, leaving citizens to navigate the resulting disorder. Even the act of walking through a crowded square becomes a strategic endeavor. One must be aware of gathering tensions, the movements of soldiers, and the potential for sudden outbreaks of violence. The instability of leadership undermines the very idea of civic duty. Citizens once relied on the state to provide law, order, and security. Now the state is fragmented, inconsistent, and often absent. Legal disputes are mediated not by courts but by personal connections or the threat of force. Enforcement of contracts, protection of property, and administration of justice are unreliable at best. Life in Rome becomes a negotiation between survival instincts and societal norms that are no longer enforced. The political vacuum leaves space for both corruption and ingenuity, for exploitation and for those clever enough to navigate the chaos successfully. Foreign threats are compounded by internal division. The empire's military is stretched thin, trying to hold borders while controlling the capital. Generals wield significant power, sometimes rivaling that of the emperor. Their allegiances are fluid. One may support the current ruler today and lead a coup tomorrow. Soldiers may desert or join invaders if the opportunity seems profitable. In this environment, even those in positions of authority are never entirely safe. Power is fragile, fleeting, and always contested. Survival requires constant vigilance, careful calculation, and an understanding of shifting alliances. The psychological impact of political chaos on ordinary citizens is profound. Fear and uncertainty dominate everyday life. Trust in institutions erodes. Anxiety about rulers, factions, and military movements shapes behavior, influencing decisions about where to go, whom to speak with, and when to act. Children grow up learning the rules of survival in a world where authority is unstable and appearances are deceptive. Families must constantly adapt to protect themselves from unpredictable changes in leadership or sudden violence. Political chaos is not merely an abstract concept, it is a tangible, daily reality that shapes every aspect of life in Rome's final century. Yet, despite the danger, citizens find ways to adapt. Information becomes power. Observing the behaviors of soldiers, officials, and neighbors provides critical insight into alliances and potential threats. Small acts of cunning, negotiation, or strategic silence can protect individuals and families. Social networks are leveraged to gain information, resources, and protection. Political awareness is not optional, it is necessary for survival. Every interaction, every conversation, every decision carries weight in a city teetering on the edge of disorder. Religion and superstition also intersect with politics in this unstable environment. Citizens seek guidance from priests, omens, and rituals, hoping to divine the intentions of leaders or predict the outcomes of conflicts. Temples may serve as centers of information and influence, where political and spiritual advice intersect. Religious figures sometimes wield considerable social power, mediating disputes or offering protection to favored individuals. In Rome's final century, political survival often depends not only on knowledge and cunning, but also on perception, symbolism, and the favor of those who hold both temporal and spiritual sway. In neighborhoods across the city, alliances are constantly tested. Merchants, laborers, and families must navigate local power dynamics, avoiding confrontations with influential figures while seeking opportunities for safety and profit. Gangs, mercenaries, and rogue soldiers exert influence in informal ways, creating parallel structures of power. Citizens must learn to recognize threats, anticipate shifts in authority, and act decisively to protect themselves. Failure to do so can have immediate and lethal consequences. The environment rewards alertness, adaptability, and strategic thinking above all else. As Rome teeters on the brink of collapse, the consequences of political chaos are evident everywhere. Markets operate under tension, streets are patrolled by unreliable soldiers, neighborhoods are dominated by competing factions, and the ordinary citizen navigates a labyrinth of risk in pursuit of survival. Authority is fractured, trust is scarce, and every day brings the possibility of violence, betrayal, or sudden change. The very institutions that once made Rome powerful are now sources of uncertainty, shaping life in a city where political awareness is as essential as strength or skill. In the final century, the empire's decline is visible not just in buildings, food, or disease, but in the very structures of power. Political chaos permeates every aspect of urban life. Leadership is contested, authority is fragile, and survival depends on understanding the constantly shifting dynamics of the city. Citizens must negotiate not only their own needs but the ambitions, fears, and actions of those in power. Life in Rome's final century is a constant exercise in strategy, vigilance, and adaptability, where political chaos touches every corner, every interaction, and every moment of existence. Even the clever, strong, or fortunate can fall victim to the unpredictable swings of fortune that define this turbulent era. Living in Rome's final century is to exist in a perpetual state of fear. The city that once stood as a beacon of order, law, and civilization has transformed into a place where danger is omnipresent, unpredictable, and often lethal. Walking its streets, a citizen cannot afford to be careless for even a moment. Every glance, every word, every step carries the potential for catastrophe. Fear is not an occasional companion, it is the atmosphere itself, permeating the very air, coloring interactions, and shaping the behavior of every inhabitant. From the moment you wake until the moment you finally collapse into what little rest the night may offer, fear is your constant shadow, guiding choices, constraining actions, and sharpening instincts in ways both subtle and profound. The first source of fear is the physical environment. Rome's streets are crowded, narrow, and treacherous. Buildings worn by centuries and poorly maintained threaten collapse at any time. Balconies crumble, walls crack, and roofs leak or shed stones onto unsuspecting passers-by. Fires erupt frequently, fueled by densely packed wooden structures, careless cooking, or intentional acts of arson. Once ignited, flames spread rapidly, consuming homes, workshops, and entire neighborhoods. Those trapped within have few options, as the streets become choke points and escape routes are blocked by smoke, debris, or panic-stricken crowds. In this environment, every citizen is acutely aware of their vulnerability, knowing that the next disaster may strike without warning. Disease amplifies the sense of fear. Malaria, dysentery, smallpox, and other illnesses are ever-present threats. Crowded living conditions, poor sanitation, and contaminated water sources create the perfect environment for contagion. Families live with the knowledge that illness could strike any member at any time, often with fatal consequences. Medical knowledge is limited, remedies are scarce, and physicians are expensive or unreliable. Fear of sickness shapes daily behavior, cautious avoidance of stagnant water, careful handling of food, and constant attention to hygiene as far as resources allow. Yet no amount of caution guarantees safety. Illness can descend suddenly, claiming the weak, the young, and the elderly, leaving families fractured and communities in mourning. Violence is an equally persistent source of fear. Soldiers, mercenaries, and gangs patrol the streets, some enforcing law, others exploiting disorder. Pickpockets, thieves, and bandits operate openly in marketplaces, alleys, and even major thoroughfares. Ordinary disputes over food, money, or personal slights can escalate into deadly confrontations. A single misjudged remark or a poorly timed gesture can provoke assault or even murder. Citizens must constantly assess the intentions of those around them, reading subtle cues and behaviors to anticipate danger. Physical skill, while useful, is insufficient on its own. Survival depends equally on perception, caution, and the ability to de-escalate or evade threats without drawing attention. Political instability compounds fear. Emperors rise and fall unpredictably. Generals, mercenaries, and local strongmen wield authority that can shift overnight. Allegiances are fragile, and a faction that dominates one day may be vanquished the next. Citizens are caught in the crossfire, often unwittingly. A marketplace controlled by one faction may become a battlefield when rival forces assert control. Neighborhoods change hands, alliances are broken, and citizens are forced to adapt quickly to survive. The uncertainty of leadership infiltrates daily life. Decisions about where to live, whom to trust, and which streets to traverse are governed by the ebb and flow of political power, creating a city in which fear is as routine as breathing. The scarcity of resources intensifies anxiety. Hunger and food insecurity are constants. Citizens may travel long distances for a loaf of bread, a handful of vegetables, or a jug of water, navigating dangerous streets and potentially hostile neighborhoods to obtain sustenance. The competition for limited resources fuels tension, rivalry, and violence. Even within families or close-knit communities, disputes over food, water, or shelter can arise, turning ordinary interactions into high-stakes negotiations. Survival requires not only courage but strategy, careful observation, and the ability to anticipate the behavior of others who are equally desperate. The psychological burden of fear permeates social interactions. Citizens learn to speak carefully, to move cautiously, and to conceal emotions that might be interpreted as weakness or opportunity. Children grow up attuned to danger, observing the reactions of adults, the moods of soldiers, and the subtle cues that indicate a potential threat. Parents teach vigilance, caution, and the importance of discretion. Every social engagement carries risk. A friendly conversation might be a test of loyalty. A neighbor's offer of assistance might conceal ulterior motives, and a passerby's glance might foreshadow hostility. Fear shapes the behavior of every individual, influencing choices, relationships, and even identity. For women, fear manifests in unique and pervasive ways. Daily life requires navigation of a city in which physical vulnerability is heightened. Crowded streets, dimly lit alleys, and unstable neighborhoods create constant risk. The protection of family members, the avoidance of harassment, and the management of personal safety are all paramount concerns. Mothers balance the need to provide food and care with the imperative of keeping children safe, often making impossible decisions about risk, exposure, and survival. Social norms and expectations place additional burdens, constraining options and requiring constant awareness of the intentions and actions of others. Men, while perhaps physically more able to defend themselves, face fear through responsibility and consequence. They are expected to protect their families, labor for survival, and navigate the complexities of political and social instability. Failure to protect loved ones, secure food, or maintain alliances can have severe repercussions, ranging from personal harm to social ostracism or death. Soldiers, laborers, and artisans alike confront physical danger daily, compounded by the unpredictability of political forces, rival factions, and criminal elements. Courage, while necessary, is always tempered by the awareness that strength alone cannot guarantee safety. Even ordinary citizens with no political ambitions must contend with fear that is systemic and omnipresent. The decline of law enforcement, the unreliability of soldiers, and the breakdown of social norms create an environment in which survival depends on constant vigilance. Daily routines, going to market, fetching water, walking to work, or visiting neighbors, are fraught with risk. Each step requires assessment, calculation, and sometimes improvisation. The mundane becomes perilous, and ordinary life is transformed into a continuous exercise in strategy and caution. Fear also influences long-term planning. Decisions about where to live, whether to invest in property, or how to educate children are made under the shadow of uncertainty. Many families avoid areas perceived as dangerous, even if resources are scarcer elsewhere. Some citizens relocate entirely, fleeing to safer neighborhoods or attempting to leave the city altogether. Migration, while offering the potential for safety, carries its own risks. Travel is dangerous, new environments may be hostile, and resources are limited along the way. Every choice involves weighing immediate survival against potential future peril. Social networks become critical to survival, yet they are fragile and often transactional. Allies may provide protection, information, or resources, but loyalty is conditional. Betrayal is always a possibility. Trust must be earned and maintained through careful action and observation. Citizens navigate a web of obligations, favors, and alliances, where failure to fulfill a commitment or misjudgment of character can result in harm. Families rely on extended networks, neighbors watch one another cautiously, and communities form informal structures to share resources and alert one another to danger. Survival depends on the ability to manage these relationships wisely. Religious and superstitious practices also intersect with fear. Citizens seek guidance, protection, and reassurance from priests, temples, and omens. Rituals, prayers, and offerings are performed not merely as tradition, but as practical strategies to influence fate, avert danger, and secure survival. Temples may serve as centers of information, where citizens gather to learn news of political shifts, military movements, or the intentions of powerful figures. Religious observances offer both spiritual comfort and practical advantage in navigating a city rife with uncertainty. Children growing up in Rome's final century experience fear as a normalized part of life. Play, education, and socialization are conducted under the shadow of danger. Lessons in caution, observation, and self-protection are as vital as any formal teaching. Youths learn to assess risk, avoid conflict, and negotiate social hierarchies with care. Games and interactions often mimic the strategies of survival, reinforcing skills needed to navigate a city where even small mistakes can have serious consequences. The education of the young is inseparable from the reality of fear that dominates daily life. The psychological consequences of constant fear are profound. Anxiety, hypervigilance, and mistrust shape personality, behavior, and social cohesion. Citizens may become cynical, suspicious, or overly cautious, affecting decision-making and relationships. Emotional resilience becomes essential. The ability to remain calm, think clearly, and act strategically in the face of constant threat separates those likely to survive from those who falter. Mental strength is as important as physical capability in this environment, and coping mechanisms develop out of necessity, often manifesting in rituals, routines, or patterns of social interaction that prioritize safety above all else. Fear in Rome's final century is a universal experience, transcending wealth, status, or age. The rich may be insulated from hunger or disease, but political violence and the volatility of fortune threaten even the powerful. The poor face constant threats from scarcity, illness, and crime. Soldiers confront danger in combat or from unpredictable superiors. Merchants navigate economic pressures and social instability. Every citizen, regardless of circumstance, must live with the awareness that survival is uncertain and that death or disaster may come without warning. The city's environment, its political chaos, and its social conditions converge to create a climate of omnipresent fear that shapes all behavior. Amid these challenges, survival requires constant adaptation. Citizens learn to read social cues, anticipate threats, and act decisively when danger presents itself. Observation, prudence, and strategic thinking are crucial. Knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, when to move, and when to hide becomes a daily necessity. Even small decisions, choosing a route to the market, selecting a neighbor to trust, or deciding how to distribute food, carry weighty consequences. Life is a series of calculated risks, where awareness and agility can mean the difference between survival and death. Fear also sharpens senses and instincts. Citizens develop a keen awareness of their surroundings, noticing subtle changes in the behavior of others, shifts in the atmosphere of the streets, or signs of impending danger. Reflexes become faster, judgments more precise, and attention more focused. Survival depends on reading both the physical and social environment accurately, interpreting signals, and responding appropriately. In Rome's final century, these instincts are honed not through training or education, but through necessity, forged by the relentless pressures of an unpredictable and dangerous world. Even leisure and celebration are constrained by fear. Festivals, public gatherings, and entertainment must be approached cautiously. Crowds present opportunities for pickpockets, sudden violence, or political confrontation. Participation requires awareness, vigilance, and careful positioning. Enjoyment is tempered by the constant calculation of risk, transforming what might once have been carefree moments into exercises in cautious observation. In a city dominated by fear, no aspect of life is entirely free from the shadow of potential threat. Families navigate fear collectively. Decisions are made with consideration of each member's safety. Children may be sent to safer neighborhoods, elderly relatives shielded from exposure, and provisions carefully rationed. Roles within households are defined not only by tradition, but by the practical demands of survival. Cooperation, coordination, and careful planning are essential. Families that fail to adapt to the city's dangers quickly find themselves at risk, while those that cultivate vigilance, resourcefulness, and strategic awareness are more likely to endure. Even knowledge, experience, and skill do not guarantee safety. Luck and circumstance play roles as significant as ability. A sudden fire, an unexpected attack, or a wave of disease can overcome even the most prepared individual. Survival is therefore a combination of preparation, adaptability, and fortune. The city itself is unpredictable, alive with threats that arise without warning and challenges that defy calculation. Fear is both constant and capricious, shaping behavior and influencing every decision, yet never fully controllable or escapable.